Good evening and welcome to another edition of the DMV Daily Radio Show. I'm your host, Hassan Giordano, aka Mr. Politics, back in the building. And today is none other than the hottest program in the DMV, Tell the Truth Tuesday. And boy, do we have a program to tell the truth about today. As I'm sure you've heard, Mayor Catherine Pugh has quickly announced her new choice for police commissioner earlier today. Of course, that was New Orleans Police Superintendent Michael Harrison. The city school board is set to close 4 more schools later this evening, and the Maryland General Assembly reconvenes tomorrow at noon to start the legislative process for the next 90 days. And then members of the Baltimore City Council have called for an audit in the way that the water bills are done here before any increases are set to take place. That is something that is obviously necessary. We're going to talk about that and so much more. But before we get into our program, as always, I have to let you know that this program is brought to you by our fine sponsors, such as that stellar legal team known as Bates & Garcia Law Firm, specializing in criminal defense, real estate, and bodily injury cases. Bates & Garcia is Maryland's legal treating team, so make sure to contact them today for your free consultation at 410-814-4600. Tell them the DMV Daily referred you, and they'll give you the homeboy hookup. 410-814-4600 is the number. The show is also brought to you by those savvy political strategists at Politicom Strategic Solutions, who have mastered the art of political communications and successfully gotten people elected since the 1970s. If you're looking to run for office in 2020, make sure you give them a call today to get your campaign set up with a user-friendly website, integrated social media, campaign plan, and more. And they've made sure to let me know that there is no homeboy discounts, even if DMV Daily referred you. But nonetheless, I'm sure their rates are affordable. 240-242-7505 is the number, or reach them on the web, www.politicomsolutions.com. Now, the new year is in full swing, and so is DMV Daily Media, as we are set to launch all new podcasts and live stream radio shows throughout this month. As you may have heard last night, as promised, and it was posted earlier today on my Facebook page, the Annapolis Report has been premiered. Every Monday, your man Mr. Politics breaks down all the inner workings of the 90-day legislative session. Again, set to begin tomorrow at 12 noon in Annapolis. So make sure to tune in each and every Monday to DMVDaily.news to get the latest on bills being introduced, committee hearing date and times, and the lowdown on all the smoke-filled backroom deals that took place in Annapolis. You can also hear portions of that report every Tuesday morning from 7:15 to 7:30 a.m. on WOLB 1010 a.m. as I enter my 5th year as the political reporter for the Larry Young Morning Show. I'll actually be on there tomorrow morning as well with Doc Cheatham and others as we do a roundtable discussion ahead of the start of the legislative session tomorrow at noon. So I got a jam-packed day going to the radio station, down to Annapolis, and back here to report on that. Make sure you go in, actually the pilot episode that is up now on DMVDaily.news and on our social media, you'll be able to hear me kind of break down the legislative process. If you ever wanted to know how a bill actually got passed, the standing committees that are in both the Senate and the House, how many members represent both chambers, how bills get tabled, how they actually get passed, the governor, and whether he can sign it and veto it with a veto override. All the ins and outs of the legislative process is explained in that initial premiere episode. We're also gearing up to launch the nationally syndicated legal podcast known as The Law in Disorder with Ivan Bates Esquire. That'll be a weekly podcast you definitely don't want to miss. Actually, I'm more amped about his than I am my own. But we'll delve into the 2020 elections as well with podcast Political Pond with Mark and Hassan, as well as a Value My Vote 2020 podcast. I know you remember we had Value My Vote 2011, came back with it in 2016. Now we're coming back with it in 2020. We'll sit down one-on-one with everybody who is running for office in 2020 so they can make their pitch directly to you. You can ask them questions specifically about their platforms and their backgrounds only at Value My Vote 2020. All this will be on the DMV Daily Podcast Network, but you can also get your own podcast on the DMV Daily Podcast Network, or you can just hire us to produce your podcast or your own live stream radio or television show simply by reaching out to us. 443-294-3900 is the number, or email us. info@dmvdaily.news is the email. Go to our website, dmvdaily.news. You can also fill out the form that is online, whether you want your own podcast, whether you want it for an hour or 2 hours, whether you want it daily or weekly. We do it all. So make sure you go there. We got graphic designers, logo designers, all that. All you need is the idea. We're going to make everything else come to fruition for you. So make sure you reach out to us today to make sure to get your program online. Now, if you want to join us in the studio today, even if you can't make it down here to Maryland Avenue, you can call us or text us your questions at our studio phone line. 410-819-2370 is the number. And if you're watching us on the Facebook Live page, like Jackie Addison, Joseph Kane, Marlene McClern. I don't see Marlene, but I see her son Jason shouting her out. Shane Bryan. Since Mark and Ivan ain't here, and I'm going dolo, it seems to be.
Not necessarily. So if we have our union boss on the line, Mark.
That don't count. Yeah, over there on the phone line.
I'm here, present and accounted for.
No. You was late. Even on the phone, you was late. That's definitely a fine for the tip jar. You can't call in on time. You definitely got to pay the tip jar. What's up, man?
Yes, sir. I got the tip jar tomorrow.
All right. We can go with that. Speaking of tomorrow, our guest, straight from Annapolis, the executive director for the Job Opportunities Task Force, Karen York, will be in studio with us as we break down the legislative session, what happened during the first day of the legislative process, what their priorities will be going into this 439th legislative session of the Maryland General Assembly, and so much more. So you definitely want to tune in for that program. Glad Mark is with us because we're ready to rock and roll, man. There's so much going on.
Mark, I hope you're ready.
I'm ready.
And I really want to get this out. I was going to hold this off, but these two annoyed me so much today.
Take them
because
gloves.
that is exactly what my phone kept doing all day long.
Put them gloves on,
between
Mark.
these two going back and forth about Mayor Pugh's choice to be the next police commissioner for Baltimore City. Of course, Michael Harrison is who we're talking about.
Well, at least your text messages were going off at a reasonable hour and not at 6:30 or 7 o'clock in the morning.
Bro, I can't help it if y'all ain't up at the best time of the day now. You lucky I don't do it at 4 when I wake up. Right? I give y'all a little bit of a grace period. But goodness, how you going to be the union boss and you ain't woke until 8 o'clock in the morning? I mean, the cows went back to sleep by then.
Too early because they know that I will be very cranky.
See, if you go to sleep at a reasonable time like me, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock at night, then you're able to wake up at 4 o'clock. Yeah, everybody knows me, knows I leave this show, I get home, I'm asleep in about 30 to 45 minutes, tops.
I be trying to reach him for all kinds of stuff. He be out.
I don't play. The kids be still awake before I go to sleep. Let's put it that way. I need my beauty sleep. So I want everybody to think why they are leaving. I know, Shane. I needed to bring you in here to co-host with me today. They left. I ain't even heard from Ivan. I don't even know what happened to him. I hope he's all right.
He's on his way.
He's on his way?
He's picking the money up off the table.
Oh, well, can't complain with that.
In the bag.
That's right.
All right, so we will get into it, right? All this other stuff. I definitely do want to get into the fact that we do have some interesting pieces of legislation that will be introduced starting tomorrow with the session. Definitely want to get into the school board's decision that's going to happen later this evening in trying to close 4 more schools, and most of them being charter schools at that. Definitely want to get into the city council. A couple of members, especially our friend here, Zeke Cohen, called me right before it to come and cover it earlier today at 4 o'clock. The city council held a press conference outside of City Hall, and they were calling on an independent study of the recently announced increase in water rates. We've seen this happen over and over since the Stephanie Rawlins Blake administration came in, and I think it was 2011 was the first time. It was a 3-year increase of I think it was 9% at the time, and then after those 3 years, another 3-year increase went in, and now we have another 3-year increase that's coming. I mean, it's just becoming absolutely ridiculous. And the council wants to know where that money is actually going.
Well, it's unconscionable for a city that cannot pass legislation to mandate $15 an hour for people to continue to pass these exorbitant water rates increases. I mean, how do they expect folks to pay for that? Cost of living increases are not something that most working people get. The only way they get a raise is through raising the floor of the minimum wage. And so we can't do that, but what we are able to do is increase people's water bills. I mean, thank God for Senator Washington putting in the legislation to keep people from losing their homes over delinquent water bills. But this is unconscionable to put this on the working people of Baltimore.
Yeah, Mark.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Mark. And it's not just the water bills. I mean, we've had BG&E recently that's raised their rates, and they claim that they've had to replace the gas pipes within the city. And you see the mess that they're leaving. Those are those chop outs that you see throughout the city, where they're actually cutting up the roads and putting these splits in the roads throughout the city because they're putting in new gas pipes throughout the city. And then on top of that, then you have new water system going in a lot of areas. And the roads are atrocious behind, a lot of these construction projects that are going on.
And under the DPW's current proposal, which will go before the city spending board tomorrow, as a matter of fact, water rates would then go up more than 9% every year for the next 3 years, resulting in an approximately 30% increase over that period of time. July 1 would add $8 a month alone to a typical bill for a family of three. Zeke Cohen and multiple members of the city council, including Yitzi Schleifer, Christopher Burnett, Shannon Steed, and others, said, ho. Maybe it's time that we need to have some kind of review and or study, independent study of exactly where this money is going, because they always say, oh, we need it because we got to fix the infrastructure and these pipes are aging and that and so forth. But you keep making that same excuse every time you raise it, but nobody ever asked them how much money came out of all these raises since 2011 and what actually has gotten fixed, what hasn't, and at what point do you say, okay, well, you've got enough money to fix whatever you need to fix. That's enough.
And this is yet again another example in this city of the landed gentry and the moneyed interest being able to dictate what happens with fiscal policy. The people who could least afford a water bill increase, like seniors on fixed incomes and single mothers with children, well, they're not seen as commodities in this city because they're not seen as that's not where the votes come from to get you elected. I'm glad that this council is standing up for folks from economically marginalized communities, because it's long overdue, and not just on this issue, but on a whole range of issues.
Absolutely. And I'm going to tell you something. You're right, Shane. I see that there's a lot of contractors making a lot of money off of this. And it was interesting that I just read a report earlier today, an article, actually on LinkedIn, where in Flint, Michigan, when it was ordered to do the work on those pipes for their water system, and we know what happened over there, that the person that got the sub on it, the contractor, was the only female minority contractor, African-American, female-owned contractor that got the contract to do this work, which was remarkable, right? That was a good thing. But I don't see that really happening in a city like Baltimore, unfortunately. Even though we're a majority African-American city, I don't see them getting the subs or any other kind of contracts like that, right, to that degree. And, that's not to say, okay, it's fine if they're black, long as that, no, I think Shane's right. There's a lot of people getting rich off the backs of the poor. Right. That just can't happen. But at the end of the day, we also would like to see women and minority-owned contracts being afforded and awarded here in the great city of Baltimore, like we saw in Washington, D.C.
And LGBT.
Absolutely, but that's a part of it, though.
Right?
But that's a part of it. That's a part of it. Mayor Pugh announced that LGBT community is now a part.
But you said women and minorities, and I just want to make sure we had the LGBT community in there. That's all.
Yes, sir.
Well, it's still WBE, right? And SBE. So
right.
I don't know the new term. So
no, I know.
we know
I'm
it's
just
included.
making sure we didn't get left out.
I think it's still SBE out.
Now, legislation is being proposed by City Council President Bernard Jack Young that will cap water bills on a sliding scale for low-income households from 1% of income for those who make less than 50% of the poverty level to 3% for those whose income is from 100% to 200% of the poverty level. And, I'm almost feeling like I think Jack does a remarkable job in some instances with the youth bills and stuff, but it's almost reactionary, right? It's like, okay, well, we're going to hit them upside their head, but I'm going to give you a piece of legislation that at least give you a Band-Aid that you can cover it up, right? So you don't bleed out. And it's like, does that really do us any service or any justice?
Well, look, I am quick to attack this council president when he is wrong. Mm-hmm. So in this instance, with him coming up with somewhat of a solution, I can't quibble with it at this point. I mean, a sliding scale based on your ability to pay is a pretty responsible solution. Reactionary though it may be, I'm hard enough on Jack that when I agree with him, I'm not going to take issue with him. So kudos to you, Mr. Council President.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm not I think he did a remarkable job on this. He always does it for seniors. I think he did a brilliant job on leading the council down there to Texas, even though we know now it was a wasted trip and a wasted money. But at least to be an oversight. We're going to talk about what he sent out to the mayor today and the questions and the requirements that he has demanded that the mayor and this new nomination of Mr. Harrison provide the council in order to get any confirmation vote. I think he's been on the right side of that. But my thing is, at some point you have to say, enough. And this is why my argument to take away the two mayoral appointees on the Board of Estimates is something that people across the city have been arguing for years. I know I have, and a whole lot of other people, because the mayor comes in with 3 votes. Yeah. And so if the council president is that adamant against these water and bill increases, I'm sure Joan Pratt may be on that same side, then you would never, I don't care who the mayor is, would never be allowed to get these. Stephanie wouldn't have been able to get them through, and neither would this mayor or any future mayors without some type of reasonable compromise, even if you have a member or 2 members of the council on there. So you have some kind of, but to have the mayor who now has 3 votes because the 2 appointees are mayoral appointees who, work for the mayor, is going to automatically vote in the favor of the mayor. Correct. Is a flawed process, period. And it's not done anywhere else. Even, the Board of Public Works in Maryland, you have the governor, you have the comptroller, and you have the elected member, the treasurer, who's elected by the body of the Maryland General Assembly. 3 people who are, 2 of them are at least, are respective and elected by the people of this great city. We need a different process here in the city of Baltimore, and I'm hoping that'll be the next constitutional charter amendment that gets across the desk and to the voters of this great city.
I think you're absolutely right, Hassan. I think it gives the mayor a little bit too much power and authority, and in some cases she dangles it like a carrot on a stick whenever she wants something, out of the city council that may have to come through the Board of Estimates. She can guarantee that it may have a passing vote. And she can use that, as a concession or as a bargaining tool to get whatever she wants kind of passed and pushed through. Or I
wouldn't say that Catherine uses it as a carrot. Probably any mayor has used it. This mayor it's a top-down mayor-heavy type of system. Correct. Right? So they have the power of the purse strings and the power of incumbency of being that mayor. Right. So,
but in some cases, we know that could be a manipulative tool.
Oh yeah.
To get what the mayor wants out of the city council, even though the city council may have objections to a certain bill or may have objections to a nominee in some cases. And we've heard it. I'm not going to expose everything that we've heard, Hassan, but we've heard it that, that the mayor uses, certain things as a bargaining tool. I'll give you this for your district. I'll give you that for your district, and unfortunately, it becomes this carrot on the stick to kind of get the city council members to kind of come in line and follow suit and get the things that the mayor wants done in city council. I think it gives her a little bit just too much authority and too much political power.
And Brenda Austin says that the property tax assessments for 2019 just came out, so city taxes are going to increase for a lot of us, higher real estate taxes and water bills, as if that's new. I mean, it's, you know what I get pissed at, Mark, is when I look at my Verizon bill and you got all these local taxes tapped. Like, hold on, that wasn't my bill. I don't pay that monthly.
The
and
cell
then I go to
phone
my
tax
bill,
for Baltimore City,
and all these little taxes that add up just end up pissing.
Remember,
me
it
off.
started with the pager tax. There was a pager tax
when you had back in the day,
right?
With the beepers.
Right.
So we're going to get into it. Michael Harrison, the current New Orleans police superintendent, who has said that he is, and has told the mayor reportedly that he is resigning his position and coming to become the interim police chief here in the great city of Baltimore until the confirmation hearing, which I like even better than Joel Fitzgerald, who was kind of, I ain't gonna quit until I got something. He seems to be all in this process. Was named earlier today to be Mayor Pugh's nominee to be the next police commissioner here in the state of Maryland. Now, Mr. Harrison has been operating under a federal consent decree like the one he'll be tasked with implementing here down in New Orleans. He spent a substantial portion of his career in internal affairs, something that should be on the top of his mind, especially being a commissioner here in Baltimore in the wake of the gun trace task force. He comes to the city with having a historically high rate of violent crime here that he had down in New Orleans. He was 27 years and only with one police department in New Orleans for 27 years, not moving around job to job like Joel Fitzgerald did. So that's another commendable thing. But he does come with a very storied and tenured success story. In most aspects, most people you ask would say that he has been a commendable commander down in New Orleans, and even members of the city council who may have been upset with the process that this mayor has went through previously in selecting the commissioner has offered up nothing but, even if it's tepid, kudos to her in this selection, which was relatively quick. So, Mark, you're close to this mayor.
Well,
What was your thought process on? Were you shocked by the sudden announcement within 24 hours of the Fitzgerald withdrawal, or did you think it was going to be kind of sooner rather than later in her choice?
Hold on. Let Jason go first because I'm answering the call.
Okay. Well, so I was very surprised that she did pick somebody so early within the first 24 hours. I was hoping that she would at least take into some consideration that the folks had brought to the table at the city council hearing on Saturday. And I think most of the folks there were looking for a homegrown commander. I'm not too much impressed by Harrison, and me and Mark have been going back and forth all afternoon about this. Like Flavor Flav says, don't believe the hype. New Orleans still sits in the top 5 and has always sat in the top 5 as far as the most violent cities in America, along with St. Louis, Chicago, Baltimore, and cities like that. And what's crazy is that New Orleans doesn't even have half the size population of Baltimore City, but per capita they still sit, within the top 5 as far as violent crimes is concerned. I think that, again, here is another city that has a little bit different of a demographics, although there are some similarities. Last census reports there's about 60% African American within the city, although most folks are saying it's a little bit less than that. Huge immigration population has moved into New Orleans. And hold on, and the tides are changing as far as the demographics is concerned in New Orleans. But New Orleans is not the same city that it once was, and this is what I was going back and forth with Mark. Most of the housing projects have been abandoned. The Lower Ninth Ward is not the same Lower Ninth Ward in the impoverished community that it once was, and I've always been an advocate to say that with poverty comes crime. Unfortunately, unfortunately. And in a lot of the cases, what was going on in the Ninth Ward was generational impoverished folks in that community that generationally have been dealing with the economics of New Orleans. New Orleans is totally different now. Unemployment has been around 4%, little over 4% for the last 12 months. It has managed to fare well out of the recession and is doing pretty good economically. And I think that most of the folks that are coming back to New Orleans, because New Orleans did have a hiatus of almost 300,000 folks during Hurricane Katrina, and 250 of them never came back to the city, even though the population is growing. I think most of the folks that are going back, well, I'm saying that's what I'm trying to get to. Most of the folks that are coming back to the city are looking for job opportunities, and is not part of the same group that was originally some of the natives that, were causing some of the violent crimes and some of the spikes
you can't
that
blame
you were
Harrison
seeing
for that.
No, but no, that's what I'm saying is that Harrison has nothing to do with really the change that's going on as far as policing and the reduction of violent crime, and that city still remains within the top 5 as far as violent cities in America. So he's not really, he doesn't, everybody wants to tout the success rate, but it's minimal at least. It's not a huge success rate. It's not something that is a huge accomplishment, as far as reducing crime in New Orleans.
Okay.
And
Mark,
some of it has nothing to do with him.
What you
Chief,
taking?
I can't bear it a moment longer. First of all, 80. Let me tell you what percentage of people in New Orleans that left because of Katrina have returned. 88%. 88% of people who left New Orleans have returned. So
That's not true. That's not true.
So,
That's not true.
So it is true.
That's not true.
That is true.
That's not true. That is not true. That is not true.
Absolutely.
Well, the counselor
That's
said
not
you're
true.
2-1.
That's not true. That's not true. I could show you. I can easily show you reports online that show the demographics of that city. Right.
This is from the Federal Census Bureau, the Department of Commerce. Okay.
The last census that was actually documented was 2010, and according to the newspapers, down there, only 56% has returned.
Come on. You had 3 or 4 minutes.
Go ahead.
Can I finish? Okay. I'm not talking about the biennial, the every 10-year census. The Census Bureau releases reports on migration in different cities probably every week of the year, okay? Mm-hmm. So the idea that the Census Bureau has nothing to say about population except every 10 years is ridiculous. There is a report that was issued from the United States Department of Commerce that I will post a link in the comments when I get a chance to, that demonstrates that number is 88%. Okay,
but Mark, that doesn't even add up to the current population numbers.
The current population numbers, you're actually wrong, though, Jason.
The current population numbers is at least half of what it used to be in New Orleans, and I could show you
the
that.
population of New Orleans
that's not
is
true.
2018, 417,000 people.
And at a peak of New Orleans,
you gotta let people finish, man.
Well, at the peak of Hurricane Katrina, it was over 400,000 residents in that city.
But now there's 417,000.
Yeah, so that's not a big deal.
And you said over 400,000.
That's not the current population number. I'm telling you.
Look, I'm looking at it right here. Right. In New Orleans, it fell from 484,000 before Katrina, April 2000, to an estimated 230,000.
Correct.
172.
Okay,
but has now grown over 250,000 people that got back up to its almost current numbers of pre-Katrina.
Thank you, Hassan.
But I'm trying to tell you that's not the same.
I'm looking at the data center from Katrina and the actual analysis.
That is not the same residences that were originally there. That is not the
88%. Jason, I know you don't like the number, but okay, even granting that part of the reason for the historic drop in crime may be some migration patterns, maybe some of the most poor, most poverty-ridden, most criminally minded folks left New Orleans. I'll grant you that may be responsible for some portion of it. But you cannot, you guys 2 weeks ago were ready to give Deputy Commissioner Barksdale the key to the city because of reductions that he achieved, but yet this guy who's been there for almost 5 years, who has overseen a historic drop in crime in New Orleans. I posted an article from the New Orleans Advocate, which is the paper of record.
That wasn't me. That was Hassan that was an advocate of Barksdale. I wasn't the advocate.
You were too.
No, I was not. No, I was never an advocate.
I'm a huge fan of Tony Barksdale.
He's an advocate of Barksdale. I'm not a huge advocate.
Let me finish.
Right.
The point I'm making is that crime in New Orleans has fallen to lows not seen since the 1970s.
Correct.
Okay?
1971. Correct.
Now, you might want to say since the 1970s.
Correct.
Okay.
But it still remains the top 5.
Okay. Well, okay.
But that's just homicide.
Right,
You can't
right.
judge everything
Right.
off a homicide.
Right. But that's
exactly right.
Right.
That's exactly right. Right. The number of violent crimes in New Orleans is at historically low levels since this superintendent has come on. That's not for debate. You can debate why, but you can't debate whether it's so or not. Some things are just facts. Okay? That is a fact. And the fact remains that that this superintendent is universally seen across this country by law enforcement experts as one of the bright and shining stars of law enforcement. It was a coup for us to get him. This mayor, politically and substantively, had a master stroke in getting this guy to come here because, quite frankly, she did it with Jack Young on one side of her and Bill Ferguson on the other side. She cut out the legs from the opposition, and now we're moving forward. I know that I'm not claiming that he's a savior. I don't think any police commissioner is a savior for this city. But to sit here and argue with a straight face that somehow all the numbers are cooked in New Orleans.
I didn't say they were cooked. I didn't say they were cooked. I said he's not 100% responsible for the lowering.
Well, okay. And what you did was you said, well, look, Houston claims that their increase in murders is a result of people that relocated from Katrina. And as proof, you posted an article from 2006, okay, 13 years ago. Now, are you really arguing that is still responsible for the historic drop in crime that he's experienced in 2018?
I'm telling you that the wards that were originally populated with the housing projects, and we're dealing with some of the most poorest communities within New Orleans, no longer exist, and that those that are resettling, but Mark, even though I haven't been in New Orleans, I still read the crime stats. I still look at the Department of Justice crime stats.
Because you didn't even know the population.
I do know the population. I said what the population was.
It seems like it doesn't matter who this mayor picked. If she didn't pick Sabrina Tapp Harper or a female like you wanted, you just weren't going to like whoever.
No, I wanted it definitely. Well, I definitely wanted it to be homegrown. I think it should be homegrown.
Why?
I don't. So,
for the simple fact that, again, anytime that anybody has ever came to Baltimore, and this was the issue that I had with Dr. Batts, that's right. There is it's not about a Baltimore is different. It's about the learning curve. It's about the learning curve of this environment. This environment is different. This environment is not the same as New Orleans, and I don't care how you think of it or picture it. It's not the same.
No place is the same as any other
right.
place.
So if anything, I would want somebody that doesn't have to have such a large learning curve. That was one of the issues with Dr. Batts that I kept arguing about. And what happened when Dr. Batts came here? He got a culture shock when he came into this city. Anybody that comes to Baltimore City, especially someone that's been 20 years in one police department and has never touched ground in Baltimore City, is going to have a culture shock and is not going to be able to easily adapt to what's going on as far as the policing is concerned.
All right, can I say something?
Yeah.
Can I say something?
Let's hear from our legal.
I know I was late, so I apologize. A couple of things I want to talk about.
Ain't no apology. Just put the money in the tip jar and we keep moving.
Look, when it comes to the process that our current Mayor Pugh used, everybody will agrees that it was not the greatest.
Correct.
With Fitzgerald, I do feel sorry for Fitzgerald because it kind of just eviscerated him, his reputation, everything without knowing him. However, when you sit back and look, the committee that she relied on said, hey, we interviewed these other applicants, but that person over there, that's really the best person for the job. One, because He's one of the few police commissioners that's ever operated under a consent decree. Number two, he's turning back, in terms of crime statistics to record lows. And number three, even though Baltimore is in New Orleans, they're very comparable, very comparable. If this person will agree to be with you, this should be your choice. We know he didn't apply. But why didn't he apply? He's from New Orleans. He's born and raised in New Orleans. He's given his whole career to New Orleans.
Correct.
I'm just not, if I'm him, I just don't want to walk away from it.
Of course.
But then you sit down and say, they really, really want me. I see what's happening, and this is my expertise. There are so many other issues and variables here that I don't think the average person is taking into consideration. But when you sit down and look at it, I have to acknowledge that I thought it was a great job by the mayor. This was a masterful, as Mark said, a masterful stroke in terms of the selection process. I understand what you're saying. I'm the number one person saying, hey, you have to understand the system. You have to understand the system. You have to understand the people. You have to understand things. But when you sit down and look at New Orleans, and I have a lot of family in New Orleans, they're very, very similar. When you sit down and I asked Valencia, my sister, what did they think about him? They're like, oh, man, we love him. He's homegrown. He knows the people. He gets in the community. He's about
and
us.
That's the difference. You just said it right there.
But
homegrown and knows the community.
He knows the community there, which means he's going to be willing to know the community here.
And just because a police commissioner,
right.
and just because a police commissioner has been under consent decree, Batts was under a consent decree when he came from Long Beach. Yes, he was.
Yeah, but
they were getting ready to face receivership.
Yeah, but Batts,
because they weren't complying with the.
But let me ask you this. Let me ask you this.
Right.
You're not from here. You're from New York, right?
Originally.
But yeah, you view yourself. You've been here as long, but you know Baltimore, right?
Yeah, but I'm almost 30 years. I'm 30 years
but what I'm
in
saying
the trenches of this city.
But what I'm saying is that you can learn it. And my whole thing is this.
It took me 20-some odd years.
Elections, as I always say, elections have consequences.
Right.
We elected her to be mayor. Right. She's made her choice. And at the end of the day, I think it was a good choice. Right. Now, the other thing I do want to talk about is something I don't know if y'all talked about that Hogan did. Hogan had a press conference today. And the talk about crime in Baltimore City. And you know the two people who weren't there? The mayor and the state's attorney. That spoke volumes. Because Hogan has said, I'm going to start giving the federal government money to try to fight the crime in Baltimore City. Where he's basically said, I'm going to go around, i.e. the state's attorney, and I'm going straight to the federal government.
Is that not considered an overreach as far as Baltimore City's,
HELL, no.
Right.
What it's saying is, he's saying, look, you're not getting your affairs in order.
Someone else's pond.
It doesn't. His whole thing is like, look, I'm the governor. I see what's happening. You haven't gotten it straight one way or another, so I'm going to go ahead and do what I got to do. Now,
no, this is a rhetorical device from a Republican governor. He doesn't have the power to do anything without declaring some kind of state of emergency and sending in the state National Guard. He doesn't have the power to do anything. All of these press conferences by Hogan are just pandering to white people in the suburbs who are his base to say Uncle Larry is going to keep these donkeys in line. Don't you worry, y'all.
Yeah.
He does not have any confidence.
Here's my thing.
But that's huge.
I want to ask you this, right? Since you're saying that it has to be on. And look, I make no mistake about it. I believe that Fred Bielfeld was one of the greatest we've had recently. But who would be the longest serving, most tenured, and probably the most successful police commissioners we've ever had in Baltimore City?
The one that we chased out.
No. Who's the one we chased out?
The one that was chased out. What's his name?
No.
So the one from New York?
No, not New York. Not New York. The one that was chased out.
No. You're talking about Kevin Clark.
Yeah, it was Kevin Clark.
The longest tenured, 15 years, and probably the most successful was a man by the name of Donald Pomerleau. Came under the Schaefer administration with his last. He came actually in during 1966. Didn't leave to the 80s. Guess what? He was from Montana. He wasn't from Baltimore. But if you ask anybody, historian, he was the most successful police commissioner to wipe out corruption in the police department, to wipe out, goes through the riots of the 1968 riots, through the racists, through the crack epidemic and everything. He did all of that successfully, but he was from Montana. So I
You
can't
can
say
it
you
was
can't
successful.
say
I think there were some civil rights
that-
violations in there somewhere.
there's always going to be.
Right.
There's always going
Right.
to be.
You can't- I
There's
mean,
no
come on, man.
perfect policing.
Right.
It's
It's sort
not.
of like, it's to me, look, at the end of the day, she was in a corner and it looked like she had no way out. And she freaking hit the game winner at the buzzer. That's
Well,
how
I
I
wouldn't
look.
call it a game.
No. That's how
She
no,
took
no.
it into overtime.
No.
She ain't no game
Well,
winner.
and
Right,
you know
right,
what?
right,
then
right,
it's the
right.
shot that Ray Allen made for the Miami Heat
still-
against the San Antonio
he's still-
Spurs that gave him the overtime, and now she has the momentum.
He's still
look at it from,
comparing
but
it
look
to
at it
these
from this point of
sports
view.
highlight moments.
But look at it from this point of view.
Right.
What's amazing, she did it today.
Right.
And if I'm not mistaken, is today the last day that you can go ahead and give your political donations?
The fundraising.
Tomorrow at midnight.
So
tonight.
think about it. Think about it. This is what I want to say about the mayor. The mayor's raising money left and right. She does this today. So that tells all your political people on the fence, I got this. I know what I'm doing. So she can now she makes the call and she sends out that email to everybody to write another check.
What's funny
Boy,
is
that's you know what?
funny is-
Gary, you gotta respect the game.
Recognize game.
Ivan, what's funny is she sent the email out with no fundraiser on it. She sent the email out.
Oh, you
I
can
have
best
the
believe
email.
a fundraiser
it's
call
gonna follow
went after.
Oh.
It's gonna follow, but she sent the email out.
She making calls right now.
Right.
She making calls to the big donors who are now like, you're right. We're headed down the right path. And let's look at it like this. The primary is in April. This commissioner will probably be approved, say March, right? This commissioner needs at least a year and a half to 2 years before they can really be judged. You can't even really actually judge her on the job that the commissioner's doing.
Oh,
You'll
but
have
they
to
will.
and they
They
will.
will.
But you will have to judge her on the selection, which right now it looks on paper, it looks like it's brilliant.
But it does, no, I'm telling you something. If that man comes in here, no matter what he does, we got 300 plus homicides again this year, and it's up to over 100 by the time March or April comes around next year. I don't give a damn what he's done. They're going to judge her off of that in the 4 years of 300 plus homicides, because this is a city that me and Bass talked about makes no sense. You can reduce the violent crime, the crimes that deal with just average car break-ins and quality of life crimes, but everybody in this town always judges it on homicides, and that is not really a fair kind of system
Or quality
to
of
judge.
life type crimes.
I just said-
burglaries-
Well, I will
you said
say one
homicide.
thing.
I said
I'm talking
quality of life
okay,
crimes.
okay.
Right, but that's
If homicides go down another 10%, and she can claim that homicides are down 30% over 3 years, I think she's doing a pretty damn good job, don't you?
Not really, because I'm gonna tell you something. She can say that they went down. They're not 340 something. They're only 309. Unless she gets them under 300, nobody cares.
And we still have over 6,000 shootings.
No, I'm telling you, nobody's going to listen to a 10% decrease, especially when they walk out of their house and bodies are falling left and right.
Correct.
What about another 10% increase this year?
If she
So
gets
then
it
we're
under
down to
300,
270.
she can
Is
talk.
that
There are
enough?
so many variables.
So there's some magic number about 300. Okay.
I'm just telling you, because
Well-
you look at the media, look what they do.
Yeah, it's
it's the
300.
number
I
is
believe you.
300.
I'm not disagreeing with you.
The variable that people aren't seeing is the federal government. By Hogan basically partnering with the federal government, by Hogan now basically pushing bills to say, hey, if you use a gun, you have a prior handgun conviction and it's in a violent crime, it's 10-year minimum mandatory. And the other bill he wants to put together is a bill that's going to sit down and say, we're going to sit down and let the judges' actually sentencing records be public record. Yeah. By doing that, those types of maneuvers and partnering with the federal government, you're going after a group of individuals who tend to be the repeat violent offenders. However, what's happening in Baltimore, it's not the old heads. It's the young kids who have no records that basically are out here pulling the trigger left and right. How does the federal government deal with that?
But that's what I was telling Mark, and we were going back and forth on, was New Orleans does have a different criminal justice system, and it's a lot tougher and a lot stringent down there. So it's not the same prosecutorial type of system.
But the fact remains that New Orleans has had the same criminal justice system over time, and this man has still brought historic reductions. Period.
And not to mention, here's my thing. Catherine Pugh has the right to name who the hell she feels like. You should have waited and asked the community. No other mayor's done. Matter of fact, when Sheila Dixon Fred Bielfeld, The community and the politicians wanted Charles Ramsey from D.C. She made up her mind overnight to say, "No, the hell with that. I'm going homegrown. I'm going with Fred Bielfeld," and it turned out to be in her favor.
Let me tell you something.
Period.
It's important to understand here that a panel of respected and senior law enforcement officials and executives from across the country interviewed Sabrina Tapp Harper, and she finished dead last out of everyone they interviewed.
Mark.
They found her completely unprepared and not ready to take the office.
And Harrison was number one.
Mark,
he was above. He was even above the last guy, Joel Fitzgerald.
Right.
Mark, we had a professional panel that said that Detective Shooter committed suicide, and we're seeing the evidence is weighing different.
God.
I mean, come on now. I don't trust these professionals in these committees and these commissions.
At some point, you have to trust the experts. At some point.
But you're gonna trust the naysayers that show up at City Hall because they ain't got nothing else better to do on a Saturday.
Because the people want what the people want. That wasn't just the average grassroots activists that we see like Shorty and them. That was the.
I would believe Shorty before half the other ones.
600,000. You had 50 people testify in a city of 600,000. They're not.
Was it even 50?
What the city wants or what the people want. You had 50 people who testified in a city of 600,000. They don't speak for the people.
It put it like this. It was the more proactive ones, and we do have a caller on the line.
But before we get to the call, real quick, Mila Cromer, great point. You know what would be great? A scientific survey that gauges the quality of life in Baltimore City from year to year to actually weigh what's actually happening on the ground, right? Yeah. That we don't just hear it from an overall. That's actually what me and Dr. Leaf were just talking about last night in DMVDL trying to do with the community thing. We were
like a report card, even a report card.
That delves into those actual communities and talks to the actual people that is being affected by this and saying, how is your quality of life? Right. Whether it be the school system and the schools you just shut down or joined together or with crime or whatever the case. Great point, man.
And I think that you talked about having something like that, the community associations kind of meeting, town hall, where the community associations come in and kind of voice exactly their concerns and their needs and what's going on with
That's our
mainstream media. No. That's not what Malia is talking about. That's not a representative sample. That's like saying, let's talk to the 50 people who showed up at City Hall, and that way we can.
No, those are the ones. Talking about. No, we're not talking. We're talking about bringing them active.
I'm talking about going door to door. She's saying scientific survey, going
door to door.
Yeah,
not this community association president.
But the community associations
they don't speak for them either.
But most of the community associations are the ones that are unfortunately proactive in this city. Everybody else,
but you can't.
Everybody else lives in these shells.
They're not representative of who lives there.
I know they're not representative, but those are the ones that again are the movers and shakers in a lot of these communities, unfortunately.
Well, then you get them, and then you hire them to go door to door in the community.
Right. Yeah. If anything, they can go out and get you the survey. They can go out and get you this, the data.
Well, that they can be helpful, but they are not the ones who get to speak for what Malia is suggesting, in which I completely agree with. And we ought to figure out a way to fund it through, whether it's Annie Casey or someone should fund a quality of life survey that is quantitative and that is statistically sound. It should happen. I think that's a great idea.
Dr. Levin, we were just talking about that last night, but it has to be not just crime, schools, quality of life all around.
Right.
But it also has to be staggered, right? It can't be one time. Yep. You got to come back and follow up 6 months later. Has this policy affected your quality of life, right? Has this school closing affected that quality of life? Has this commissioner affected that quality of life? And I'm telling you, that's what people want to. They want to be able to hear.
We should be able to reach out, find the funding, and have her administer the poll.
Yeah,
that's
what she does.
Yes, that's what she does with them. So that's what we need to do.
And what's wonderful about it is I represent the adjunct faculty at Goucher. It would give my members jobs. Let's do it.
Well, we got the grant written up. Let's make it happen.
Let's make it happen. Let's make it happen.
We have brother Leon on the line. Hopefully, I don't lose you too, Mark. Leon, you there?
Yes, I'm here.
All right,
and
sir.
I want to refer back to this water bill thing. Why it is we, the people of Baltimore, always have to pay more. Let me give you all a little synopsis, okay? I was the certified construction project manager for Loyola University. Since 1993, I've been in Baltimore, okay? I sat on nearly every major construction project that the city did as far as water pipes, okay? How long are we going to keep spending money, good money after bad? Our infrastructure is over 80 years old, okay? I have kept water into Baltimore County when they shut down the Guilford Reservoir, okay? Let me tell you all this. The water comes from Hilton Pass. They have never tried this before. I told them we can use the buildings at Loyola University instead of the Guilford Reservoir by backfeeding the water off a child instead of bringing it in the normal way. Let me tell you this, okay? I have done Baltimore City as far as water. I can tell you where every piping is in Baltimore City, okay? They called me since Kurt Smoke to sit with George Bailoff downtown on every project they had, okay? I know more about Baltimore City water than Shai that's sitting downtown right now. Okay. Shai used to have to report to me when O'Malley was mayor when we have problems, okay? They should call me at Loyola University to find out where valves are. And I wasn't even born in Baltimore, but I did my research. I worked on World Trade Center Building 1 until it was 32 floors, okay? I've been in the construction field longer than any one of these people downtown, okay? Let me tell you this. They have tried in the early 90s to say they can claim to resurface pipe. You cannot resurface pipe once it starts to rust. The inner core of the pipe will deteriorate. They call spinella. And I would like to ask Joan Pratt this again. How much money did you spend in overtime and cost these contractors that came with these brainstorm ideas and nothing was done? They ran pipe all over Baltimore City above ground, but they never cleaned out a pipe. We spend millions and millions of dollars, but yet we the people in Baltimore City always have to pay the cost. No, y'all not going to flim-flam us no more. We are not paying no cost, and I stand with Jack Young and the city council because they are fooling the people, and no longer y'all will fool the people. I sat in consultation on every project due for water in Baltimore City. People, we not paying no cost no more. We need the city and Joan Pratt to tell us how much they spent in overtime and contractors since 1994 till now, instead of replacing the pipes in the street versus patching them. Every time you patch, it breaks out somewhere else. Go ahead, sir.
Brother Leon, let me ask you a question. So, is it true or not true that President Bernard Jack Young sits on the Board of Estimates, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and how many times have you been down there since you've said you've been down there? How many times have you personally seen?
I ran for city council president, okay?
Right. No, I'm saying, but how many times?
Young does not want to meet with me.
Hold on. How many times have you been, since you said you've been down at the Board of Estimates meetings and the votes and seen some of the votes?
No, let me say this. I haven't been to the Board of Estimates meeting. Okay. They used to call me at Loyola, and every project they had going on in Baltimore City, I used to sit in consultation with them as an observer. And most of the time I tell them, stop patching pipe and replace the infrastructure of Baltimore City versus patching them. We wasting money, good money after bad.
Right. Well, the reason why I'm asking you this question, Brother Leon, is how many times during these Board of Estimates votes where they've had rate increases that Jack Young has actually voted for the rate increases? That's what I'd like to know.
I don't think he have ever voted for the increases.
So has he abstained from voting, or has he been just one of the ones?
Oh, sometimes I was down there. Sometimes he wouldn't say anything. He would just pass. All right?
Right.
But
so,
I am telling you
a lot of the
that the people of Baltimore need to have more say in what goes on in the Baltimore. Right now, if you go up to Lock Raven Dam, you would see how much water is going over the spillway that we are paying for, okay?
I'd like to do the research and try to find out that, Brother Leon. I'd like to really find out how many times during these rate increases of these water bills has he actually voted either for or has abstained from voting due to either conflict of interest.
I know of 3 times. I've been around since George Bailoff and Kurt Smoke, okay? And I have sat downtown on many of these things, okay? I have talked to people that work directly with the Department of Public Works, okay? When they couldn't do the reservoir and keep water to Baltimore County, when I came up with the idea of backfeeding the water to Loyola buildings and feed it through hydrants from Charles Street to Notre Dame Lane and bypass Cold Spring and the reservoir and keep water to everybody in Baltimore City, they thought I was a madman, but it worked. Because I worked in the oil fields in the Caribbean, and I could tell you what piping will do. Once the pipe starts to rust, I don't care what you do unless you replace it, it's going to rust till it busts out.
Right. And one of the questions, thank you, Brother Leon. And one of the questions that I had for Chow, for the chair, for the director of Public Works was, you know, with most businesses, you have capital improvements. Usually you put money aside with your business. You don't expect your customers to have to pay for the redesign of your building or the improvement of your equipment. You usually put money aside to upgrade things, to upgrade or keep up with the upkeep, the maintenance and things of that nature for your property. What happened to a plan that, you know, actually included capital improvements over the years to constantly work on the water system so that we're not looking at a 100-year-old system that's so outdated and has never really been maintained or been taken care of? You know, where did the money go? Because people have been paying their water bills for years, and in some cases been losing their homes over erroneous water bills. So this is what I don't understand.
All right, so we're not flipping back and forth. So we're talking about the police commissioner right now. Before we go into the school board stuff, and we definitely want to let people know that the council president, Jack Young, has put out a letter to the mayor earlier today in regards to stating and pursuant to City Council Rule 1411, which provides from time to time that the president may submit to the mayor a letter specifying the background and related documentation and other information requested to accompany nominations made to the city council. Now, he's laid out an entire list that they want to see: the copy of the superintendent's resume, a copy of the completed application, a list of any civil or criminal cases that he's a party to, his federal and state tax returns.
Number 3 is just a stupid question, and I'm going to tell you why. Because anytime the police department gets sued, he's automatically named. Right. Anytime. So it may have nothing to do with him. Right. What they needed to say with number 3 was, and this tells me they didn't consult with an attorney, it should have said where you have personally been sued. Because if I'm him, I give him a list of every time a police officer has ever been sued in the history of New Orleans, the 5 years that I've been there.
Deliver boxes.
Here you are. I mean, because my thing is, we operating off of emotion. Let's take our time and do this the right way.
Right.
And I'm sorry, but I'm a stickler for that detail. If you're going to take your time, you can write the letter, and you want to sit down and show that you want to at least attempt to be fair, at least come on, man. Don't ask the dude for every single lawsuit.
Then he says he wants all letters of reference that the administration received in reference to him being nominated, a complete copy of all investigative reports conducted by the administration or any other party into his background, a copy of his personnel files from the New Orleans Police Department and all other police departments for which the nominee was employed, which was none. I don't know why that was included. Copies of any other documents the mayor and her senior team used when assessing superintendents, and then asked 10 questions that they request that the administration provide responses from Mr. Harrison, which include: will you make yourself available for multiple meetings with city residents, which will be open to the public, and questions asked by the community? Describe your ability to implement community-based policing practices and examples. Assess and describe your ability to implement community-based policing practices and provide specific examples. We'll set it again. How would you assess your ability to explicitly address institutional racism and bias, both within the police department and between the police department and the community? For him to describe the ability to conduct and implement a top to bottom policy review change, and did you incorporate an equity lens when doing so? If you did that in New Orleans, please describe your commitment to training officers, implementing new training requirements for officers. Describe your ability to implement data-driven policing practices. Describe your familiarity with the consent decree in U.S. versus Police Department of Baltimore City, etc., as well as your commitment to full and effective compliance with their requirements. What's your experience reducing crime, particularly violent crime, in a way that adheres to the Constitution is? And we have a strong desire among city residents that the next police commissioner nominee be from Baltimore. Please describe your connections to and knowledge of Baltimore City's communities. If I was Fitzgerald or Harrison, I'd tell him, you kiss my damn.
Oh yeah, I would. You know what?
Let me ask you something. Does it sound like if they don't get this, there'll be another delegation trip to but this time to New Orleans? I mean,
You know what? The problem is, to me, they've already played that hand.
Right.
I mean, let's sit down and look at the issue with Fitzgerald. To me, was that Fitzgerald just didn't have the experience. He didn't have the knowledge. And he wasn't in an area that was similar to Baltimore. We sat here yesterday, and Councilman Brandon Scott said, hey, if I want someone to have experience, something comparable to, say, like New Orleans. Right. Those were his words. And lo and behold, boom, here she comes today, and she selects the police commissioner from New Orleans. So if they want to go spend another $6,000 or $7,000 of taxpayer money to go down and find out he's a native son, they're going to have the love for him. But more importantly, one newspaper articles I read with the consent decree, they said 80% of the officers felt that the police department at that time period was going in the right direction. Mm-hmm. This is a difficult job.
Yeah,
especially dealing with
post Katrina. Especially dealing with post-Katrina.
I'm saying Baltimore City is a difficult job.
Oh, did you talking about New Orleans?
Well,
New Orleans was difficult as well.
New Orleans was very difficult as well. Remember, when you look at his background, he was in internal affairs. He did narcotics. He did all the things that the police want to sit and see to have respect of this officer.
See, all of those are red flags for me because I've dealt with internal affairs in Baltimore City, and it was the police.
Who do you want to be the police commissioner?
It was the police policing the police. Mm-hmm. That's because I've had bad experiences here with the internal affairs here. I actually had an officer that had 25 years when we went to go file a complaint on our original civil suit that I told you about. That officer had been 25 years in the police department. And even though we had multiple witnesses that said that the officer attacked me and saw what had happened, this officer said, I don't believe one word that you or anybody is saying in the process. And this was just a preliminary interview. But it's the police policing the police.
But that's
and I've never really had a trust of that internal affairs.
That's what internal affairs does. And there's no evidence
and
that you have.
Unfortunately, there was a lot of.
There's no evidence that you have whatsoever that he was on an unethical internal affairs.
But officer. They found that Baltimore City internal affairs had a lot of issues.
And you know what?
That came out.
They all have issues. But he's not here in Baltimore City.
Exactly. Like that makes one incident you have with this person does not affect the nature of Michael Harrison and his appointment. Like that doesn't even make any sense or connection. But also with crime, people are upset in neighborhoods, and this is what we were talking about even with possibly doing this analysis, is with schools. And tonight, the Baltimore City School Board is scheduled to vote on the future of 5 schools, potentially bringing the number of schools closed in the district since 2004 to 75. 75. The district is recommending the closing of Gilmore Elementary, Monarch Academy, Northwood Community Academy, and Roots and Branches at the end of this year, and then closing Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Elementary and Middle at the end of the following year. Now, remember, family, the board had previously voted to close Banneker Blake Academy at the end of this school year just a few weeks ago, just last year. That facility, of course, was founded by the former councilman Carl Stokes, and they have said that they will appeal that board's decision. But later tonight, these latest round of closures comes as the districts grapple with how to handle this shrinking student population and these so-called low-performing schools. But a lot of people are upset that, number one, most of them, a great majority of the ones under the Santelides administration have been charter schools as opposed to public schools. And she has made it clear that she is no fan of charter schools. And there's been no specific data as to why these schools are being closed other than taking out little excerpts here and there, but no overall data as to whether this school was not performing well, because the attendance, even at, the Banneker Blake, was high attendance. At two out of these three charter schools are packed, and they have excelled. But at the end of the day, they're continuously closing, and they're blaming this $1.1 billion we got with this 21st century school plan as their reason for closing many of these schools.
Monarch is a fine school. Monarch is a fine school. My grandbaby goes to Monarch. I got to give a shout out to Monarch because they're down there right now protesting at this city school board. I think that they do outstanding work. Them children are engaged at Monarch. Them children are inspired at Monarch. And them children are fighting and upset about the closing or potential closing of Monarch.
Students from Monarch deliver more than 1,000 letters and petitions to the board ahead of tonight's.
And I commend them. They're getting their first hand taste. They're getting their first hand taste of grassroots activism. So at an early age. So I commend them young ones. And my grandbaby has been out there several times with signs, asking her school not to be closed. So
now, if students, now it appears that MLK is closing. If students would be rezoned to either Pimlico Elementary and Middle or Edgecombe Circle Elementary. The problem with that is you're rezoning these kids to neighborhoods outside of their own, who then now have gang issues that they got to worry about,
or have to be bussed in.
Issues. They got not just the busing issue, but then the violence that goes on with the communities. There's a multitude of issues, right? That I don't know. It just seems like this system is getting. Those kids have been failed by the school leadership. You're absolutely right, Jason McLaurin. I think what is going on created confusion. Jesus helped Baltimore City Mayor to do the right appointment process, Sylvia Harris says. But I think in the school situation, we have to get a grip on it because like Penderhughes was recommended for closure last year after officials determined there weren't enough students in the Sandtown Winchester neighborhood to fill both Penderhughes and Gilmore. Those community members rallied together and came up with an alternative plan. And this is how we're going to do it. We have to we saw it with Northwestern being closed.
Yeah.
We have to stop giving
control
of the school board who are getting six-figure salaries, who are not responsive at all. I went to my kid's school the other day to get the login. You got login now that you can go and look at their grades and stuff.
Right.
Well, mine didn't work. So I said, look, I need a new login. They told me it could be at least a week because they got to call down to the city school
help desk.
And they said they don't get back to them for days, if not weeks.
Right.
For a damn login.
Right.
I'm not asking for money or anything else. I just need a login.
Right.
Yes. That's absolutely ridiculous. And we have to start returning the control of these schools back to the communities, back to the parents and these local administrators. We got somebody on the line?
Yeah, we have one caller. Caller, you there? Caller, you there?
Yes.
Yes. Good afternoon, sir. Welcome to the DMV Daily Radio program.
How you doing?
You have a question or comment?
Hello?
Yes, go ahead. You're on the air.
Yes. Okay, y'all still talking about the police commissioner?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Understand. Most of the crime happens because of the living conditions that some people are living in. How do you expect one man to actually change that without changing the condition people living in? Y'all trying to pick the right person to make a change that man will be able to do.
Mm-hmm. Right, and that's what I was saying was the difference of the dynamics in New Orleans. New Orleans has had less than 4% unemployment rate for almost 12 months. That's a big thing when you look at economics in a city.
Yeah, you're looking at a person that you're going to give this person a job to fight crime, but not change the conditions people live in that causes the most crimes.
Well,
it's ridiculous. You spend all this money instead of trying to actually change people living the conditions to the best. I mean, it's a police officer. Police it's not going to be able to stop crime unless conditions of people living it is changed. Exactly. So this is, all that bull is just a waste of time.
You know, it's interesting because if you sit down and look at what Governor Hogan did, where he's given, I think, almost $50 million, or it's an absurd amount of money. The one thing that I didn't see in that report,
the opportunity zones?
No, not to the opportunity zones. I'm sorry, to fight crime. Where he was there today, made his announcement to give money he wants to have the special agency to bring in 200 officers who are going to focus on gangs. He wants to make tougher laws. He wants to sit down and also, basically, quote unquote, lock up more people who are going to be violent, who have guns. I understand. I get that. I would have liked to have also had him say something about, and we're also going to invest $50 million with this organization for job performance.
You're not going to hear that in Baltimore City.
But
that was from the governor.
But understand. Just lock them up. Get more cops. More cops don't stop crime. Okay, it's improving. The job's not. Cops you put on the street is not going to stop people from having to do things to feed their families.
And the police isn't there to prevent crime, right? And
no,
so that's
not
their job.
All they do is react to the situation. They don't prevent anything.
And so what you're saying is, which is absolutely true, is we need preventive measures on the front end that prevent those crimes, like jobs,
economic improvement, neighborhoods, block associations.
Remember the Powell Centers from back in the day?
To change the life of them.
Or even hiring someone that's involved in urban redevelopment, or in what's the title they have at Coppin? There's an actual course that they have in Copkin.
Urban gentrification.
Yeah.
Okay, this is what you see. Urban gentrification. That makes the community better. They say, well, get rid of all the people who doing crimes and bring people in and don't do crimes.
Yeah. And look at it.
Listen,
look
lock
at
all
what
the brothers up and bring more people in.
Look what they did when they moved all the people that they knocked down the projects, moved them out into the county. Now look what you see in the crime that's rising right there in Baltimore County, right off of Liberty
Dundalk,
Road.
Essex.
And they're putting them back in that same environment because now you move them out there. Guess what starts going up? Liquor stores coming up. The check cashing places, all of a sudden they're popping up out of the clear blue sky. And it's not a mistake that these people and these businesses target our communities. They ain't out there in Pikesville coming up them damn stores. They know that they're not going to frequent them.
I even said this to Mark that there's some reports on Facebook and on Twitter that I saw that some of the white folks in Dundalk were kind of upset and mad because their daughters were getting pregnant by guys named Little Peanut and Little Ray Ray, and they didn't know, they didn't even know who the baby's daddy were because, they were dealing with these guys from East Baltimore that were coming out to Essex and to Dundalk and were getting their little daughters pregnant, in the process. And they didn't even know these cats other than their street names,
Well, Shane Bryan says on Facebook, a flaw of the 21st Century Schools program was to focus on creating huge elementary and middle schools. They are putting 3 smaller community schools into one huge building. They are tearing down community centers that are connected to schools, but not rebuilding the community centers. Then principals control the building and close out the community, even though those buildings were built to be used by the community, and that's a very big, huge problem going on.
And that's a part of gentrification.
Okay, we say communities, but we use that word kind of loosely. If you don't know who your next door neighbors are, how you in community? I'm like, what?
Yeah, and we do live in these silos, unfortunately, in many of our communities.
We live on neighborhoods, on blocks, but we don't no block association, no community associations. Okay, then we expect things to work better for us. But the whole point, like I said, they know this. This is why they did it. This is why they closing the schools down. They getting rid of community centers. They're selling more of the beers that people drink on the corners and stuff to create stuff like that. But we knew this here since the 1960s, but we still choose to do the same thing over and over again.
Well, we thank you, my brother, for contributing to the DMV Daily Radio Show. Thank you.
Well, that's a good question. What is the age group that is committing most of the crimes? I don't have the data to say, but I know that the greatest majority of those being killed are those between the ages of 18 and 30.
Yeah.
And that has been an ongoing trend for many a years,
And-
way before this
And
administration.
Fox 45 actually did a report recently where they actually looked at those crimes that were actually solved, the 40 some odd % from last year that was solved, and actually who was committing those homicides. And unfortunately, it was still in that same bracket, that 18 to 30-year-old bracket. And in some cases, many of these guys were on probation or parole, and in the large majority of them were on some of the strictest parole and probation, or supposed to be probation standards in the state, but still ended up committing a homicide. So, Hassan, just really quick I made a statement, and again, I don't want to necessarily throw Jack Young under the bus unless I have all the facts. And I just wanted to bring up one of the votes in 2006 with the water bill rate increase. So it was Controller Joan Pratt and Council President Young actually voted against the increase. But because, again, it's a 5 seat Board of Estimates. At that time, it was Stephanie Rowland Blake, and of course,
No, that's not right. 2006, he wouldn't even been the council
not 2006,
president.
16.
You said 6.
I'm sorry, 2016. The 2016 water bill increase. He voted against it. So did Controller Joan Pratt voted against it.
He voted against most of them.
Right, but here's the thing. Again, it goes back to what you were saying early about the mayor having control. And at the time, Stephanie Rowland Blake and her other 2 nominees, unfortunately, voted in favor of the increase. So again, here you go back to the mayor having a little bit more control over what's going on with the Board of Estimates, and can really kind of override, even though the city council, may take the concerns from each district and bring that back to the council president. The council president and the controller really have no authority if the mayor decides to move forward on something like a rate increase.
We just talked about that earlier.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. But just to clarify things, because I was asking Brother Leon whether or not, did Jack Young abstain from voting, or did he vote against it? And it looks like majority of the times him and Controller Pratt voted against any water bill increases. So,
You got some news you want to talk about that, or y'all going to talk about that tomorrow?
I'll let you break it.
Huh?
I'll let you break it.
So we want to talk Tell the Truth Tuesday, right? We're going to get in depth with this tomorrow with the individual who's going to be a guest here on the program. But remember a couple of weeks ago, we had our good brother Kahan Dillon on the program, and it was a incident in reference to him and another young man during a community affair
fundraiser
that he ended up filing charges against this young man. Well, this young man who wanted to come on to answer those accusations being made against him by Mr. Dunn was then referenced by us and his attorneys not to come on while charges were pending. Well, of course, he hired, as I tell y'all all the time in the beginning of the show, if you got a legal challenge, you better hire Bates and Garcia. Well, he hired him. And today, Mary from Bates and Garcia's law firm, a stellar attorney, ended up getting him acquitted of all charges.
No, that's right.
Not
Not
just
guilty.
a stellar
Not guilty.
attorney,
Right.
but one of the baddest attorneys you'll see in the courtroom, and just happens to be 8.5 months pregnant.
She's still pregnant?
Yes,
Oh my
she's
God.
supposed to have the baby in 2 weeks.
She's been pregnant for like 3 years now.
I know.
So Ivan and Bates, we get W's.
Well, you know what? Like I said, I can't take any credit for this. I wasn't involved with it. I didn't want to make it look like I had any conflict of interest whatsoever.
Right.
The young man just happened to reach out, call the office, spoke to Miss Lloyd. Miss Lloyd did everything on her own, didn't ask for my input on anything. And she reached out to me to let me know that the judge said it was not guilty, all charges.
So he will be on the show tomorrow in an extended Tell the Truth Tuesday programming. So y'all can really know about what happened and the incident
Wake up
between
Wednesday.
him and Mr. Dillon. So that will be an interesting show. And of course, we'll also be talking about the legislative session that starts tomorrow at 12 noon in Annapolis and extends over the next 90 days till midnight of April 8th. It's going to be a lot of bills that are being introduced. Some of them that you want to pay attention to: legalized sports betting will probably be voted on and approved for the state referendum by the 2020 elections.
And the lobbyists are out on that.
With the state referendum, that's a constitutional amendment. It actually doesn't go until the next state election, which would be 2020's presidential. So while it probably will be raised during this session, it may not be passed until the next session in 2020, because typically Mike Miller likes to have all the state charter amendments passed the year of the election that it would be heard. Increasing the minimum wage to $15 an hour. I know something that's near and dear to Mark's heart and to SEIU 1199. That should be, I'm predicting it's going to be passed this year. Now, it'll probably be incremental, like we saw the one in 2014 that was passed, that kind of took steps to get us to where we are today, the $10.10 an hour that we stand at today. That was done incrementally. Legalization of marijuana will be addressed, either the recreational use, but not just that, but also there's loopholes that these companies are playing with this medical use, that they're trying to control the licenses. And it's a loophole. They're getting around it because you're only supposed to have one. So what they're doing is hiring another company that they saying that they're the company, but they're really controlling it. But so long as their name isn't on it, then they're able to get multiple licenses.
And have you seen what's going on in Dundalk? Like there's like clinics everywhere. Like there's two on what's that? Going on Northern Parkway. Not Northern Parkway. What's over there by Merritt Boulevard and that where the Kmart used to be at? North Point Boulevard. I mean, there's two of them right there on the stretch of North Point Boulevard. Like one on one side of each other. It used to be a Burger King on one side and on the other side.
It's profitable. You got ranked choice voting, open primaries. That'll be an issue that'll be dealt with regarding Baltimore City itself, as well as a moratorium on water bills that we talked about will be putting in. We're also going to be looking at statewide campaign finance reform. Now, of course, we talked about it on this show. I had the bill put in by our fine councilman, Christopher Burnett. That passed through the city council, and the voters approved it for Baltimore City. It's been done in Howard County, Prince George's County. This, because the governor currently is allowed to use campaign finance reform. They can opt into this and be able to get campaign finance, but the state legislators can't. And so you can see a big push that's going to be happening in Annapolis regarding that. Abortion protections and the constitutional amendment protecting abortion rights, especially because of the new Supreme Court and the makeup of the Supreme Court. People are beginning on a state level to be able to try to get state law in and written into the Constitution just in case they try to reverse Roe v. Wade. Clean energy be dealt with. Education funding, the Kerwin Commission certainly is going to be dealt with. Opportunity zones, the Hogan federal initiative, that'll be dealt with. Redistricting is something that I'm really focused on. That's going to be humongous, especially with this new court decision. With the Supreme Court will take up the Maryland case that just came out of Maryland in terms of gerrymandering and redistricting. What that means and what that means for beyond 2020 and the Governor Hogan and the legislature having to redraw the lines.
They may not be able to get to that this session waiting for the Supreme Court ruling, correct?
Yeah, but so there's two things. Redistricting is going to happen after the census regardless. But now they have to redraw the 6th congressional district because of what the federal court said.
Right.
If the United States Supreme Court takes hold of it, they actually expedited it. So they're going to hear it in March as opposed to April.
So it's still enough time in the legislature to do something.
Well, they probably won't make the decision until, because they leave in July, right? Then they in July until August, and then they come back what's called Bloody Sunday in October. But they may not bring the decision back till after the session's over. But Speaker Mike Bush has kind of somewhat assured me that more than likely they'll call a special session if they have to, if the Supreme Court agrees with the federal courts and they have to redraw the lines, then they will call a special session that will deal specifically with just that. When you call a special session, you can't deal with a whole host of stuff. You got to deal with the one particular thing that they've called the special session to deal with, it'll be that. So that'll be interesting. Will Democrats kind of feed into this nonpartisan redistricting now that they got a Republican that's in charge of drawing the maps, even though the legislature really is still in control, right? He can't just draw a map and they cool with it. Like, it still has to pass through the legislature. So that's a whole nother thing. But that's going to be huge, especially, again, we have nobody from Baltimore City on the damn committee in the Senate that is going in front of Education, Health, and Environmental Affairs. I don't care about that 1/3 representative over there. I don't. She don't represent me. We need somebody from Baltimore City on that committee, and I'm going to continuously raise this issue till Mike Miller decides to do something, because clearly our delegation don't care. They ain't been talking about it. Somebody needs to talk about it. Vanessa Atterbury, I want y'all to pay attention to her. She's not Baltimore City, she's Howard County, 43-year-old vice chair of judiciary now.
She is.
Second term. This is only her going into her second term.
You know, I went to school, when I went to law school, William & Mary, she was an undergrad at William & Mary. I've known Vanessa for many, many, many years.
Oh, really?
And even a deeper note, she's Lana's cousin by marriage.
What?
Yeah. So I've known state legislator Atterbury for many, many years.
Wow. So she's a rock star right now, rising rock star in the Democratic Party. She actually has a few local pieces of legislation in Howard County. And the reason why I raise it is because she's the vice chair of judiciary.
Yes.
Baltimore City's delegate Luke Clippinger is the chair of judiciary. So that's humongous, being the chair of such a powerful committee that Joseph Valerio, if y'all know him and his antics, he was the chair forever. He finally got defeated at the ballot box, but he liked to play a lot of games, especially with Baltimore City bills. And judiciary is the committee that most pieces of legislation, all pieces of legislation that deal with the legal system and the criminal justice system go through. So this is a very, very huge committee when it comes to the criminal justice system and reforming the criminal justice system. But Vanessa has two interesting bills. So she's trying to reform and do the Board of Education, the school board, and making that elected, right? 5 members elected by each district and then 2 countywide. But she's also doing something that we did here. I don't know if y'all remember back in, I think it was 2010, we elected a young lady to the Orphans Court. I felt so bad for her. She actually won. She was one of those ones that just ran just to run. And she finally won to the Orphans Court. And then the legislature got into session and they said they changed the rules on her to say that you have to be an attorney.
You're talking about Ramona
Baker Moore.
Correct.
Because she wasn't an attorney, but it wasn't in anywhere in law that you couldn't be. So they ended up changing the rules on her. But what they didn't do is change the rules on orphans court judges, at least in Howard County. And that's what she's trying to make sure doesn't happen, that you have to have some kind of legal background to be an orphans court judge. Now, mind you, I think that's what she run, orphans court judge. But my thing is this: you should have set that woman, man. I mean, you can't then after she wins retroactively come back and say, but I'm gonna put this caveat in that you have to be a lawyer. Not to mention, honestly, okay, you're a judge. Yeah, you might want to be called attorney. I want to be an attorney. But when it comes to orphans court, you're dealing with
the administrative,
administrative part,
right.
That's what us at the Register of Wills deals with, right? So if you're not an attorney but you've been with the Register of Wills and you know that process, I ain't mad at you being an orphans court judge. Right. But I think you should have some kind of experience because you are presiding over these cases. So, she didn't have it. So that's what Vanessa's dealing with in Howard County.
We did an interview with her back when we were the first DMV Daily. So way back, Ustream video, her crying.
So we'll be back tomorrow. It's time for us to wrap it up.
Also, Hassan, is the bill for ghost guns and non-traceable guns also going to be discussed as well?
Yeah, that's going to be an administrative bill, I think, coming from either the Speaker or the Senate President.
Okay.
That's going to be interesting. So we've gone from Valerio to Luke Clippinger.
Yeah.
Wow.
We were hoping to get an African-American on there as committee chair, to be quite honest. But Speaker Bush decided to put Luke, at least that's Baltimore, right? And then put Vanessa.
So you go from a defense attorney to a prosecutor.
Right.
for judiciary.
Yeah, I would have never looked at it like that.
Oh, yeah.
Only an attorney.
Totally different. There were some bills that Valerio kept out that were absolutely atrocious.
Mm-hmm. From a defense standpoint.
From a people standpoint.
Right, because he was a defense attorney.
Yeah, he was a defense attorney, and he believed in protecting people's rights.
Right.
Where, and I'm not saying that, that Luke's not going to do a great job, but defense attorneys and prosecutors oftentimes tend to look at things a little differently. And, it'd be very interesting to see how it's going to, shape out. I'm really interested.
Well, we need to talk about that on the upcoming show.
I had one question for you, too. With Nathaniel Oakes gone, what committees have we lost with him, or vice committees, or anything that we've lost as far as Senator Oakes is concerned?
No, because Jill's there. I mean, they are after every election anyway, and every session.
I mean, is she going to come in and take over whatever committees he had, or is she going to lose it? He wasn't a commission chairman or anything like that.
Right. He just got to the Senate himself. Remember, he was just appointed, so he had no seniority there. He had more seniority in the House when he was there, but he was just appointed a year prior to Jill, so he really didn't have no seniority. She's just coming in. She's actually going to judiciary with judicial proceedings in the Senate. She's an attorney, which is a great move. Put Mary Washington there, which she really should be on EHEA. But no, we didn't lose anything with Nat because he didn't have any real leadership in the Senate. So we're still good to go. We still got that representation with Senator Carter. I think even more effective representation on that committee. He wasn't on judicial proceedings. So Mike Miller, he shaped it out. We look good other than the EHEA. But make sure you go check out the Annapolis Report every Monday. We're going to delve into that. Of course, we'll talk about it here on the DMV Daily Radio Show, some of the bigger bills. And Ivan and I will definitely talk about some of the judiciary stuff and that. But Annapolis Report, definitely going to hear it every week, every Monday, right there on DMVDaily.news. But until tomorrow, remember the new promise begins with a new day. Therefore, the promise of tomorrow is greater than that of yesterday.
Free Keith Davis.